Greetings, my fellow bookworms. Today we're going to be doing a quarterly reading wrap-up. And yes, I said quarterly, not monthly, because I do not read enough books in a month to justify doing a video. And yes, this is a mug full of ice water because I only like water when it's freezing cold, and water is the only thing that doesn't affect blood sugar. So a lot of the books that I read in the first 3 months of the year were actually library books, which means I can't physically show you the book. So I'm just gonna put the cover somewhere on the screen so you guys know what book I'm talking about. So the first book, I actually read it as an ebook on my Kobo. I read a lot of library books on my Kobo this year. And that was The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This was a book that I read basically because I kept seeing it posted online and people were like, it's a great fantasy, and seemed really popular. And I was like, you know, might as well try out a popular fantasy book. So I put a hold on it at the library and it came in. So this book I actually finished on January 1st. I did most of the reading in December, but I just didn't finish it quite before New Year's, which means I still get to count it for this video. The Priory of the Orange Tree is a very classic, typical fantasy. Anything you can think of as typical fantasy, it essentially has, with the exception of other races. You have the evil Dark Lord who is returning, you have the heroes who are going to fight him, you have politics between kingdoms as a result of this evil returning, you have magic. It is a very classic fantasy book, but I really enjoyed it. Sometimes you just want something that is a very classic fantasy story, and that's exactly what this book was, and I really loved it. I can see why it got so popular, and I'm definitely glad I read it. I'm not reading the prequel. The story wrapped up nicely. Why do I need a prequel is frankly my opinion on that. But it was overall a really enjoyable book, and I'm definitely gonna look into some other books by the same author. So the second book I read this year is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. I am somewhat new to my Brandon Sanderson journey, which as a fan of fantasy sounds insane. In my defense, if your first experience with Brandon Sanderson was The Wheel of Time, you kind of don't necessarily want to do The Wheel of Time again, and that's honestly what I thought the Cosmere was for a long time. I was wrong, obviously. So I read Elantris in January. This is the fourth of his books that I've read. The other 3 books prior to this were all part of his secret projects, which I loved. You and Me and the Nightmare Painter and the Frugal Wizard's Handbook to Surviving Medieval England. 10 out of 10, amazing books, love those. Borrowed them from the library because I wasn't sure, and I'm getting my own copies so I can read them. So yeah, I read Elantris. People say it's not his best work, but honestly, it seemed pretty typical of what he writes, at least based upon my very limited experience. I enjoyed it. It was a straightforward fantasy. There wasn't anything insane going on with it. I don't even know, frankly, how to describe the plot. The plot is essentially this mix of like politics, religious wars, and experimenting with magic. It's very, very hard to explain what the actual plot direction is in a succinct way. At least in my opinion, it has just a lot of threads going on. They're all very interesting, and the characters are all really interesting as well. I like them all, and there wasn't any point when it switched to a point of view where I was like, oh, this guy again. I enjoyed all of them, so I am very glad I read this. I will probably reread it again in a few years, but overall, I liked it. I'm continuing to be a Brandon Sanderson fan, and it's all good so far. The next book I read was Half Sick of Shadows. So this book, I honestly forgot the summary when I picked it up. I forgot what it was about. For some reason, I thought it was gonna be about Morgana. It was not about Morgana, Morgan Le Fay, Morgause. Wasn't about any of those. It's about Elaine Shalott, and it's actually based upon a poem from, I believe, the Victorian era about Elaine and Lancelot and their doomed love. And the title comes from a line in that poem. All that being said, it was a good book. Personally, it didn't blow me out of the water. I mean, you can get my attention with just about anything that's based upon the Arthurian legends, frankly. It was good, don't get me wrong, but I didn't like the way it would time jump around. So it would keep doing occasional flashbacks to when they were children or flash forwards to Elaine's visions, because the main character, Elaine, and the narrator is a seer in the book. And that's, to a certain extent, okay, but it was a lot, and it was trying, in my opinion, to pack a lot of plot in, and it didn't really pay off. Mild spoiler alert. Essentially, it's going through this book leading up to Elaine's death, and then because it spent so much time jumping to the past and jumping forward to possible futures, I never really feel like we spent enough time with Elaine to justify her coming to the conclusion she does. So it just feels very rushed and a little awkward. But that being said, it is still a decent book. So if you're looking for an Arthurian retelling novel and you just want something that's, you know, not Morgana or Guinevere or Arthur, then this is honestly probably good because it does focus in on Elaine. But it didn't really wow me or anything. It was just a decent, good book. So next up I have Medici Heist by Caitlin Schneider. I'm really hoping I'm saying her last name right. If at any point in any video, especially this one, I mispronounce somebody's name, I'm sorry, I'm a reader. I sound out words, I don't always get them correct. All you need to know is the title. The title is the entire premise. It is a heist to rob the Medicis in Renaissance Florence, Italy. That is the entirety of the book. Michelangelo's also there. He kind of has a role, but he doesn't do much. That being said, it's a really fun book. I think it's classified as YA, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm gonna say it is YA just because the characters are in that 17 to 19 kind of range. But unlike a lot of modern YA that's getting published nowadays, there's nothing like graphic or mature really happening. It's just that the characters are older. Yeah, so the entire plot is main character Rosa is like, I am pissed at the Medici for the atrocity that they've committed, which is fair if you know anything about the Medicis. And so she decides to get together a ragtag team of con artists and such to perform a heist and steal from the Pope and the Medicis. And it works in the end. It's very fun, it's very energetic. There is also LGBT plus rep in it if you are interested in that. I think it was very well done personally. I really enjoyed overall the entire story. I'm not gonna say it perfectly met all my expectations. There were probably a couple tweaks that could have been done to like make this the most amazing book in the world in my opinion. But it is still really fun, really good, and I mean, it's a heist in Renaissance Italy. That alone sells it, in my opinion. If you're a fan of the show Leverage or Leverage Redemption, this is Leverage but teenagers in Renaissance Italy. So it's really good. Basically, if you liked Leverage in any way, shape, or form, this is a good choice. Read the book. Okay, we are now back to only library books. I no longer have any physical books to hold up. The next book I read was Mistborn, or it might be called The Final Empire. I am honestly really unclear on what the actual title of this book is. I've seen it both ways, so I don't know which one it is, but it's The Final Empire or Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. So I borrowed this from the library and I read it. And okay, here's the thing. I was seeing a lot of people online say this is the best fantasy series ever. And I've even seen people say they regret starting off their fantasy journey reading the series because it's so good and nothing can ever compare to it. I'm not following that. Don't get me wrong. The Final Empire was good. There wasn't anything I really disliked about it. But the greatest fantasy ever? Does something happen in the sequels I don't know about yet? Because that's the only way I can think that this could be the case, is if something happens in the sequels that I don't know about yet. Because based upon the first book, it was good. I enjoyed it. It didn't blow me away or amaze me or anything. It was just a really good, typical fantasy book. That's about all I have to say on it. The next book I read was Gwen and Art Are Not in Love by Lex Croucher. I put this on my want to read list ages ago, and then finally got around to seeing, oh hey, my library has it, I'll put a hold on it. And then several months went by. So by the point I read this book, I had pretty much forgotten what the premise was, aside from one or both of them is gay. That was all I remembered. Honestly, I kind of thought it was actually Queen Guinevere and King Arthur. No, this takes place a couple centuries later, after King Arthur has reigned and died and all that. That all being said, it's a decent book. It's basically, in my opinion, a medieval rom-com, which it held together because it was medieval times. At least for me. I'm not a romance person, but I still wanted to try because it sounded kind of interesting. But because I'm not a romance person, I didn't connect with this a huge amount. And to me, it fell into the big fallacy that a lot of LGBT plus romances do, in that it focuses heavily on the internal crisis the main character is having, because oh my gosh, there must be something wrong with me. I can't like the same gender. And like, okay, I get that is an actual thing. Don't get me wrong, I get that. But when it's fiction, we can, to a certain extent, suspend our disbelief. And you can just write a romance where that is not an annoying plot factor or huge character arc thing. You can make it something else. Like, Arthur had a decent character arc, in my opinion, because he had already been like, I'm gay, I like boys. Not much else I can do about it, I'm just gonna roll with it. So his character arc was more about him learning to connect emotionally with people and to, you know, finally say F you to his dad, who was a horrible person. So his character arc wasn't too bad because of that, but the royal siblings, because they were like so panicked, we can't like the same gender, blah blah blah. One, panicking and being conflicted about it, sure. Both, it didn't work great for me. I'll be honest, it just didn't work all that well, in my opinion. But it's still a fun read if you do like LGBT plus romances and you do want something that's not contemporary. Definitely pick it up. Definitely read it. It's still really good. It's still really fun. It just wasn't ultimately for me all that much, so I'm glad it was a library book, but it was a good book. The next book that I read was The Last Murder at the End of the World. At this point in time, I had 3 library ebook holds come in the span of a few days, and library ebooks I can only borrow for a maximum of 2 weeks, 14 days. So I was having a mini crisis because I was like, how am I gonna read all these books so fast? So I sped read through to the end of Gwen and Art Are Not in Love. And then I moved on to The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton. And I read this book in about 4 days because I was really trying to get through it. That being said, just because I was trying to push through it does not mean I didn't properly read it. This book was really good in my opinion. I loved this book. I'm one of those people, like, I know a book was really got into me when weird elements of it show up in dreams. And weird elements of it showed up in dreams. So clearly some part of me heavily connected with the book. I found it was really good. I liked the characters, I liked the world building. I thought it was super interesting what they were doing with the world building and the mystery that was set up. I liked how they kind of kept you guessing till the end until they were like, oh yeah, remember that scene back at the beginning? That was not a red herring. You kind of go through the book thinking maybe it's something of a red herring, but it's like, no, actually that had like a deeper meaning, and it's literally what you think in the beginning is what happens in the end. So I guess that's kind of a spoiler, but it's really good. I really enjoyed it. I really liked the characters. The narration was bizarre in a good way. So it's entirely narrated by Abby, which is a bioengineered plant that can telepathically communicate with everyone. So that was the narrator. The narrator was literally the equivalent of a god playing around with things and trying to direct everything towards the outcome it wants. So because of that, it was a really interesting narration to read, and overall, I really liked it. I do remember seeing at some point some reviews where people were like, oh, this wasn't as good as I thought. In my opinion, it's really good. It's not an intense, mind-boggling mystery. It's more a character study mystery or a world-building study mystery, in my opinion. But it was still really good to read. Like, I sped through it in 4 days, partially because I was really enjoying it and I wanted to keep reading it. So it's still a really good book. And the last book I read in the first months of the year is Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. Again, I don't know if I'm saying her first name right. And I know. I'm late to the boat on this one. They came out years ago. They were popular years ago. Several years ago, they got a TV adaptation, or maybe it was a Netflix adaptation. I don't really know. Yeah, I'm late to the boat, okay? I admit that. I didn't know really anything about the books or the story in general. I knew there was something called Grisha, and I knew there was a guy called the Darkling who was evil but hot, so maybe he wasn't really evil. That was the limit I knew, and the fact that his actor is the same guy who played Prince Caspian. That's all I know. That's all I knew going into this book. I had no idea about anything else. So because I went in blind, I was just like, we'll see what this book's about. And now that I've read it, I do understand why it was popular. Is it fully my cup of tea? Debatable. I didn't, fall head over heels in love with it. I'm not itching to cosplay one of the characters or anything, but I did enjoy reading it. I did think Alina was very relatable and very realistic, so I liked that about it. I also liked Mal. I am somewhat biased because his name is Mal, which is the nickname the fandom has given the character Malroth from Dragon Quest Builders 2. And I love that game, and I love the storyline, and I love the characters in it. So basically that made me biased towards liking the character of Mal in Shadow and Bone. And thankfully in this book he didn't turn out to be an evil traitor, which I kind of thought might happen. Do not spoil me in the comments if that happens in a later book, okay? Don't tell me, let me find out on my own. Overall, I can see why it's popular. I'm probably gonna borrow the sequels from the library again to finish reading the trilogy. I think it's a trilogy. I actually thought it was a duology until I got to the end, and then it said it was a trilogy. But overall, it was a good book. There's one other book I read during these months of the year. Sort of. So I borrowed Wicked by Gregory Maguire, and I didn't finish it. I got about halfway through the book. I actually got to the exact halfway point through the book. I'd had it for a week, and this was an ebook, so I only had 2 weeks. And I went, I'm not enjoying this. I have a bunch of other books to read that I'd rather be reading more, so I decided not to finish it. This is a very rare occurrence for me. I normally like to finish books that I start reading, in large part because I'm actually fairly picky about the books I'm reading. there's a reason I have not read a whole lot of the most popular books, and it's because they don't sound interesting, so I don't read them. So I wanted to read it, you know, we saw the movie, plus I am a huge Wizard of Oz fan. I don't think you can see it on screen, but on the shelf above my head is all the Oz books, and I have read every single one of them. So I love The Wizard of Oz. I haven't read too many adaptations of it, but I do love it. So I was like, this is really popular, this is really well known, let's read it. And yes, I did know about the mature and graphic content beforehand, so I wasn't going in blind. I didn't like it, so I didn't finish it. Because frankly, why is it an Oz book? Literally, why is it an Oz book? Based upon everything I read in the first half, the guy wanted to write a political fantasy and just tried to shoehorn it into Oz. It wasn't really something that was like, oh, I think this portion of the Oz mythology needs to be fleshed out more. Because yes, I agree, you could write a prequel about the Wicked Witch of the West and the East. I don't think that's a bad idea to try and flesh that out at all in a fanfiction type book. But the story the guy was writing, it wasn't really that. He wanted to make a political fantasy and he just stuck it in Oz. And it wasn't working for me. All of the times he tried to fit in elements of The Wizard of Oz, it felt so awkwardly shoehorned in, and it wasn't fitting. Like, he was establishing that Dorothy was younger than Elphaba, but Elphaba and Ozma were the same age, which if you read any of the books of Ozma, what? Sorry, how is Ozma 20 years older than Dorothy? Where is this coming from? Very confusing. So it wasn't working in the end. I didn't like it. I didn't finish it. It was a very rare occurrence, but again, I had a ton of other books to read. I still have a ton of other books to read. I have a stack on my TBR that's like 12 books high, plus whenever ebook holds come in. So that's the last book that I kind of, sort of, but didn't really read for the first 3 months of the year. Alright, so I've reached the end of the books that I've read for January, February, and March 2025. I hope you guys liked hearing about the books I've read. I hope you liked my little mini reviews about them and my thoughts. None of them were bad books in the end. Some just were more for me than others, which, let's face it, not every book is for every person. Still, don't take anything I say negatively, because I don't mean any of them in a negative way, except for maybe my comments about Wicked. Those you can maybe interpret negatively because I didn't like it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed my little chat about books, and I'll see you guys in the next one.